Welcome to another episode I Level podcast in English. This episode is a really special episode because we're talking from a German in America on Zoom to an American in East Germany in Leipzig. So we just switched the locations and said, okay, we want to discover your country, so I come over.
Yeah.
That's also how we met. I met Jonathan Michie in Leipzig 2 years ago, and he is an opera singer. He's sung for the last 10 years, and for the past 8 years, he's living in Leipzig. Welcome, Jonathan. He's a good friend of mine. I'm very happy to welcome you today. And how are you doing?
Hey, Tobias. This is great. Thank you. I'm doing well. You know, we're recording this at the very beginning of August in 2020. So we've all gotten somewhat used to doing these Zoom or Skype or remote conversations because of the state of the world. But this is great. I'm really happy to see you. And yeah, it's it's cool, frankly, that we met over here and then we kind of switched places on the planet for the time being, at least. So this is great. I'm happy to have this conversation and looking forward to chatting from both sides, really, about that change in perspective, the cultural switch.
So, Jonathan, you said I already said you lived the past 8 years in Leipzig.
Mm-hmm.
But who are you as a person?
That's a huge question. Who am I as a person? I think on the most basic level, I would always say that I'm someone who likes change and likes challenges. I think that's part of the reason why the idea of moving to a new country was so appealing, because I like feeling uncomfortable. I know that sounds a little funny. I don't mean I like feeling uncomfortable, every day of my life, but maybe it's part of the reason why I was drawn to being a musician and being a performer, is that it's a job where you're constantly going to new places, meeting new people, working with new people, and sort of testing your own comfort zone and your own limits. So my job, of course, is only one part of who I am, but the more I do it, the more I realize maybe that certain personalities are a better fit for that. And I think one of the reasons why I'm happy doing this job is that I do like novelty. I like change. I like traveling in general, and would do it more. Unfortunately, right now we can't really do it very easily. So who I am, I think, is someone who likes a creative profession that I chose, and maybe even more than the actual singing part of it or the music part of it, is that it feeds my need for newness. Maybe much like we can talk more about this too, because it's a lot of parallels between being a performer and being an athlete. And it's something that you pursue, that you love, but you never finish it. You're never going to get to the end. You'll never reach perfection, that kind of thing. So there are other fields like that. Can't think of necessarily something else I would be drawn to, but I definitely am drawn to what I do because of that. So that's the first thought that comes to my mind as far as who am I as a person? Is it someone that could easily get bored if my life were static, if my life were only in the same place and only doing the same thing all the time?
So how did this, you said change is a big thing, newness.
Yeah.
And you lived for a long time in America. How did this newness change appeal every day in your life in America?
In America, as a kid, so basically until I went to college, so until age 17, my family and I moved 3 times when I was growing up, all in the northeast part of the US. I was born in Rochester, New York, upstate New York. And then we moved actually close to where you are in the Philadelphia area, moved to Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, which is what they call the main line outside of Philly. And then to Long Island, about an hour outside of New York City. So already growing up, because of my parents' work, um, there was three big moves in those years when you're developing as a person. Probably the not most shocking, but the most challenging one was from fourth grade to fifth grade. So that's something like age 10 or 11 or something around then. That was the one, developmentally, that was the most challenging, as far as new place, leave everybody behind, in a way, reinvent yourself. And maybe that went to a degree to helping me be okay with moving and changing. And then I went to college back up in Rochester, actually, just for no reason other than serendipity. I happened to find myself back there because Rochester has a great school for music. And then before moving to Germany, moved down to Miami, Florida for a training program with what's called Florida Grand Opera, which is the main opera company in South Florida, in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Which might as well have been in a different country, because I think, as you know now, living in America for a bit, it's just geographically so large that if you move from the Northeast to the Southeast, it's very different culturally, and obviously the climate and all that stuff is changed. So even staying in America, you can have a lot of difference. So anyway, so I think that change in my growing up set me up to adapt pretty well to it. And I think ultimately, maybe not for everybody, but ultimately it's a good thing, because it allows you to maybe find out a little bit who you are, that's not so tied up in being in one place, and with the same people for the first 18 years of your life. The bad side of that, for me at least, is there's no like one place that I would say is home. I mean, obviously culturally I identify as American and I feel the most comfortable there, because that's just what you know when you grow up. But I don't have that maybe romanticized sense of going home to that one place or that one city or even that one state that is always going to be home for you. So that you can have a sense of not really totally belonging everywhere when you're changing all the time where you are.
So let's define home in a new way. What is home for you when it's not this romantic thing, what maybe you know from the movies, what everybody tells you what is home? What is home for you?
I mean, the cliche, of course, is home is where the heart is, which can sound silly, but I think there's truth in that, in the sense of where you choose to put your heart, both literally, the things and people you love, and where you put your passion. So for me, home, yeah, home is obviously, in my case, I'm now married, and so home to a great degree is the person I chose to spend my life with now. But then obviously the people I care about, family members and close friends, which always changes, right? Your friends come and go in your life, and then your family members often move where they are. So home is that. Home is the people that you care about, and the things you care about, in the sense of, I feel some amount of home now in Leipzig, just because I've developed a relationship with my workplace and colleagues here, which I know at some point will change as well. So yeah, that from it's relationships, you know, and I don't even mean in some super intense way. It's not just where your most intense romantic relationship is, or family relationship. It's just the relationships you make. That makes your home. So yeah, for me, it's that physical place isn't that important to me.
So you said an interesting sentence. You said, through all this change and traveling and getting to know new cities, new areas, you understood more who you are.
Yeah.
So give us a little insight. You moved to Leipzig, to East Germany from America. What did you learn about yourself, about the question who you are?
It was a little shocking, just a bit of background for that. I had visited Germany a few times as a kid because we have real close family friends. An old friend of my father's from before I was born. Um, they family friends that essentially were like family to us growing up. One of their children is my godson, and they are from the Stuttgart area, so former West Germany. And so every time growing up, we basically visited. Well, even once when I was very young, it was still West Germany, and then visited the western part of Germany. So Germany, in my mind, was that. It was West and really Southwest Germany. So my wife as well, when this opportunity came along for this job, I said, "Oh, don't worry. Everyone speaks some amount of English there. Culturally, it's quite Western, so that initial adaptation won't be that hard." And then, lo and behold, we found ourselves in Leipzig, which is, of course, deep in the heart of former East Germany, and that was very shocking. I wouldn't say it's good or bad. It's just was shocking. Even 8 years ago, it was different than it is now. It's changing very fast. Leipzig in particular is growing very quickly. And culturally it's changing. And so at the beginning, there was far less English spoken. So in the beginning, when we had very little German skill, that was hard. And culturally still it had a more Eastern feel and frankly, a bit colder, a bit more closed off in the beginning. So suddenly we moved our life here, expecting one environment and one feel, and then we were confronted with the reality of what it was. And we had just gotten married a few months before we moved. So I kind of always joke with someone, if you really want to test your relationship or your new marriage, just move across the world to, a former East Germany, and that'll give you a chance to test your relationship. So in the beginning, it was a shock. And I think we helped each other through that in the beginning. We've grown to love what makes Leipzig what it is. We don't want to be here forever. It's not our perfect home. No place is perfect, but it's a whole world different than when we first arrived. So I think part of that, moving someplace where you had a certain set of expectations, that when you get there, you have to throw those away and say, okay, this is totally different than what we expected, but we are committed to be here and we're going to make the best of it, is hard. It's not easy. In the end, I'm so grateful that we started our life in Europe here as opposed to, Stuttgart or Frankfurt or a city in former West, because I have a lot of friends and colleagues who start in those cities and they're never really forced to adapt on a basic level, even linguistically. The opera field, the job I'm doing, is very international anyway. So if you work in certain cities, you can kind of stay in a little bubble and work, frankly, mostly in English. English ends up being the Zwischensprache, the in-between language for different cultures. And so it would be a shame if you move to a new country and you don't sort of at least maybe halfway adapt to that new place. So what was so hard in the beginning, just on a basic level, the bureaucracy, the practical things of life, learning a new environment and a new language at just even to a basic level, was much harder than we expected at the beginning, but in the end, it makes it a better experience. Your actual question, I think didn't really answer in particular. Can you ask me one more time the question?
The question is, you said when you travel, when you come to a new country, you learn more about who you are. What did you learn about yourself in this time?
You're forced to just spend a lot more time alone or with your partner, but also really alone with yourself. And so you're forced to confront who am I exactly? Um, I learned that I am actually a very shy person, kind of more of a loner than I thought I was, which is a little bit funny because, and I don't think I'm unique in this. I think there's a lot of people in the performing arts who might fall into this sort of psychological profile. Um, I can talk to anybody. I can, in a public setting, I can be friendly, make conversation, you know, certainly give off the energy and the attitude like I'm totally chill, totally calm, whatever, while at the same time having a certain amount of anxiety and wanting to be alone. So there's this funny thing of sort of, I guess, between your private and your public self of like putting on a performance for the people around you. And when you're in your own culture, you know how to do that easily. When you're in your own language, that's just normal to you. So then suddenly when you're put in a different culture and you can't do that, it makes you question who am I actually? Because this persona that I'm so used to sort of turning on in public can't do that anymore. Because quite literally, I can't use the words to do that. And then also the cultural cues, they don't read the same way anymore. So there's so much miscommunication, even besides the language. There's a miscommunication in behavior. We've talked about this when we got to know each other too, with sort of a lot of the basic stuff about American versus German openness, friendliness, what some people say comes off as maybe fake or superficial, oberflächlich. You're confronted with that. So basically, I was confronted with my Americanness by being here and saying how much of my behavior is really who I am and how much is an act that I'm putting on. I think for me, it's made me be more honest, frankly, and not feeling like I have to constantly be pleasing other people or adapting myself to other people. And maybe honestly not caring as much what other people think of me. I'm always going to have a certain amount of that. You know, we're social animals. We always are reading that and sort of exchanging that when we're having social interactions. But by being dropped in a whole different environment, I think it's made me, if not change totally, at least be more aware of my own behavior and how much of it is who I am, honestly, and how much of it is sort of more like a defense mechanism or a way of navigating the world. And so anyway, I think a lot of performers are drawn to performing for those very same reasons, because it gives you a safe space to, it's very counterintuitive, by playing a character, by saying or singing someone else's words, by being in a fake imaginary environment, especially opera, which can be the most fake, absurd environment in the world, you actually can be more honest, more yourself, more truthful, because you're in that safe space. And then you step out of that into the real world, and again, your defense mechanisms go up again. So I don't know. I'm no sociologist, but I imagine there's a significant percentage of people in the performing arts who share that kind of introvert extrovert balance.
And you mean with safe space that you have a role? Like, for example, you play the Papageno, and then you feel like you're safe in this role, and you can show certain things inside you what maybe Papageno gives you. But it's like, how, like, for me the question is, Jonathan is not Papageno, so that will never be you will never, maybe in your opera singer career, you will never present Jonathan. Like, so the question, who I am, is, are you answering that on the stage, or is it like part of that and then you go out?
I think you, in any public setting, you never are fully presenting honestly who you are, whether even when you try to. You know, even if you're not performing in a show, if you're just public speaking in public, if you're giving a talk or even just meeting strangers, you're still putting on a version of yourself that's not completely, I don't know, naked, for lack of a better word. But we wouldn't do that, you know. We learn these behaviors over time. I think the best performers are the ones who, you're right, even through the character that you're playing that is not you, you bring yourself to that. It's the only reason why we bother seeing these same plays or operas over and over again that we've been doing for hundreds of years. You know, you don't go to see a Shakespeare play again to see the same performances. You see, okay, I've seen Macbeth 5 times. Let's go see this new person do Macbeth because it's their version. They're not forcing a new version. They're channeling themselves, their emotions, their ideas, their life experience through that character. Even when a singer in our context is doing a recital or a concert where it's literally just you on the stage with a pianist or an orchestra, you're almost always singing material that someone else wrote. So again, you have this facade that's built that you're channeling yourself through. And I would argue even a singer-songwriter who's performing music they wrote, it's still an altered version of themselves. So I guess it just gives you the permission when you're performing to take risks and to express yourself in ways that you would never be either brave enough or comfortable enough to do in real life, or that are not appropriate to do in real life. I mean, frankly, if you express yourself in some of those ways in your everyday life that you do on stage, people would be concerned for your mental health and might call the police. So, so it's this world where you have freedom to play and you can get out a lot of that energy and thoughts that you can't or shouldn't in your everyday life.
So opera is basically for you a space with freedom to play, because what I understood, when you would go on the street and just sing a papageno, they would maybe call the police and say, "What's this guy doing there?" But what
Yeah, they should.
Is there maybe also a chance that 100 guys stand there and say, "What's it?" Like, we love that, and start dancing? Do you think about this possibility?
There's a chance. And whenever I see like a street performer, or I guess also referred to as a busker, you know, someone putting their hat down on a street corner and doing whatever their performance is. Are they doing break dancing or playing guitar or whatever? I think that's some of the riskiest stuff, because you really are out there and you can't control your environment and you're really putting yourself out there. And you're right. We don't know the results of an action until we take that action. And we also don't know the people that happen to be coming by, how they will receive that, how they'll react to that. But the live performance, it just gives you kind of like a scaffolding or a structure that you can work within. And some of the most classical art forms, on the one hand, you think they're the most limiting because they have all of this tradition behind them and they have all of these sort of rules or expectations of the type of performing. And just technically speaking, they take a certain level of training. You know, a ballet dancer needs a certain level of training that maybe a hip hop dancer or a break dancer on the street, they can do that in a different way without a certain level of training. I'm not saying one is more difficult than the other, but by working in an environment that has so much technique and foundation and sort of artifice around it, in a way is a safer space than being the street performer on the street, who really puts themselves out there in that regard. So this is going down maybe a more niche road, but that we might not want to go down today, but um, doing an art form that is so um, based on technique and tradition, um, I think you have to work that much harder to let yourself shine through that, especially if you add on top of a language that you don't speak. And oftentimes in classical music, not only is it a language you don't speak, but you are singing for an audience who also doesn't speak that language. You know, here in Germany, when I, as an American, am singing in Italian for Germans, it's kind of absurd on the face of it. But somehow, when it works well, which is not all the time, but when it works well, there still is truth and honesty that 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 goes through that from the performer to the audience. Um, yeah.
Okay, I got you. Thank you for this insight and for this vulnerability. That's amazing. So basically, when I understand that right, you said you are more an introvert person, but some extrovert part inside you loves the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would like to ask you, in the stage is like you have a lot of trainings, practices, and then there comes this day of stage time. So there are spectators. What is the difference between playing, singing just among the group, and then going on stage?
Um, it's a huge difference. I mean, in terms of the training, again, I would say it's very much like athletes in this regard. You train and train and train so that most of what you're doing becomes automatic. Um, because once you leave the practice room or the practice field, or and you're in front of a live audience, there is just simply a different energy in that space that you can't predict and you can't control, and it's different every time, right? So much of your job as a performer is dealing with your own psychology in that environment. And I think for me and for most people, the times that it works well is when you've done as much homework as you can on the things that you can control, right? Your preparation. In my case, it's obviously memorizing your material, learning your text. If we're doing an opera, it's learning your staging, your interactions with your colleagues, um, knowing the music inside and out. All these things that are things that you can control. And the physical use of your body, both in the singing and then whatever you're asked to do on stage. Um, so that then when you're confronted with, like you're saying, you take it out of the rehearsal environment, and now it's public, now it's in front of people, that then all of that stuff can become as automatic as possible. The sort of muscle memory of your body, you let it do it, you trust that you've put that work in. And then your main job is to be present in that moment with those people, both the colleagues around you and the people in the seats, so that you can transmit both the material you've learned and then an honest version of yourself in that moment. That's the idea. And it takes a lot. It's a lot of it is very kind of esoteric or very intangible. And the bottom line in my mind is that's when you're performing, it's those two things. You have all the tangible things, all the things that you can take care of, and then you have the stuff that's outside of your control and how you choose to deal with that. The only time that I'm really nervous or that I really feel like it's unsuccessful is if I haven't done enough work on all of those basic homework things. There are some situations where it's a last minute performance, there's a last minute change, maybe, you know, in my case, a colleague is sick and you have a new colleague and you get one rehearsal with them, and so you're unsure about maybe what they're doing on stage. Those are the times that can be more nerve-wracking because some of that stuff is not prepared. Or if you just haven't done your job and you don't know your material as well as you should, that's when I think it goes wrong. If I've done my preparation work, I basically don't get nervous anymore in that sense. This topic, I know the German word is Lampenfieber. In English, we say stage fright. Um, is unique for everybody because everyone's psychology is unique. But I think your only way of dealing with it is continuing to expose yourself to it. Just like that very basic psychological idea of what they call operant conditioning is if you have a fear, then you expose yourself to a little bit of that fear and a little bit more of that fear, and suddenly you build a relationship with that fear. And you can never expect it to go away. You don't want it to go away. If someone tells you that they're never nervous performing, they're either lying or they're not a very good performer, in my opinion. Because you need that healthy amount of fear to adrenalize you, to give your body that chemical reaction, and to take it seriously. It means you care about what you're doing. So the basic idea for me is that you build a relationship with the audience in a way, but it's more that you're building a relationship with what happens to your psychology and your body when you're in that high risk environment. And that's all it is. It's a high risk environment because it's a moment that's happening now. It's never going to happen again. And there are people staring back at you while you do it. So whether that's as an athlete or a musician or anything in public, it's a weird human chemical reaction that we have as animals in a way to being put in front of people and saying, go, do something. Oh, and by the way, we're all going to be sitting here hopefully enjoying it while you do it, but some people are going to be judging you while you do it. And some people have this idea of how it should be. So that's the thing. I don't have fear of those people. I have a relationship to the change in psychology and body chemistry in that environment. And that's something, like going back to our first topic of change, it's different every time. It's surprising at times, and it will always evolve and change. And that's the biggest thing in my mind of a successful performer from one who has a lot of trouble with it, is learning how to have a relationship with that experience.
Let's talk about this energy. So
Yeah.
how do you connect to this like unique energy on stage with the spectators, with your mates around you, with the ensemble? How do you do that? How are you present in the moment?
The most difficult time for me is the maybe 5 to 10 minutes before a public event, be it a concert or an opera, or even an audition. In our job, it's the kind of job where you're always doing, throughout your career, you're going to keep doing job interviews, essentially, auditions, which is basically a performance for a small number of people, but it has that other energy of I'm trying to get the job, essentially. So those are the three environments, really. It's an opera environment, a concert environment, or a job interview, really, where you're doing something publicly. And the 5 or 10 minutes before then is what I have the most difficult time with. I'm okay with it now. By that I mean, it's just I'm actually eager to start. And once the thing starts, the concert, the audition, I'm almost always fine. The energy idea is, what is that energy in myself that is honestly not in the present moment? Because usually in those 5 to 10 minutes beforehand, you're not in that moment. Your mind is starting to go, what's going to happen? Am I ready? Who's out there? What if something goes wrong? All these things can start to spin out of control in your own mind. And you realize none of that is happening in this moment. That's just all these thoughts that are coming into my mind. So for me, I won't say I've been super, super disciplined about things like meditation, but I have done some reading and some meditation and sort of gotten into that because I recognized that my biggest weak point was that 5 or 10 minutes before the thing. once the concert or opera or performance starts, that train is moving. You know, you're not going to stop it. Um, and in a way, that's fine because you're saying, okay, here we go, we've begun, and you can lose yourself in that. The energy thing of preparation, obviously, the more you work in a certain field, the more you learn what's good for you as far as preparing your mind and body. So, for example, for me, on a day of a performance, so you try to get the best rest you can the night before. You're obviously going to um, save most of your physical energy for that performance. So it would be foolish if you had to do a 3-hour opera at night to go for a 5K run and hang out talking to your friends all day, because your body and your voice would be tired. So you do the things that you learn to do. I mean, that's just by experience. You learn your own psychology and your own body, how to set yourself up to be the best version of yourself for that event. And then for me, it's been working to try to be as present as possible in that moment. So some of the meditation things in terms of mindfulness meditation has helped me ground myself, both in that 5 to 10 minutes before the performance of telling myself, hey, this is just thoughts. This is part of the deal. This happens every time. Let's go. Let's move through it. Because the worst thing for me is letting those kinds of thoughts get out of control. So working to say, oh, yeah, that's interesting. I'm having this feeling again. Oh, my heart rate is increasing again. That's the natural body response to what I'm going to do, because my body knows that I'm about to enter a risky environment. And to say, hey, I've rehearsed, prepared, ready to go. Let's do this. And then shift that into the positive energy of, frankly, again, at the risk of sounding a little trite, a little cheesy, wow, I'm so lucky, I'm so grateful that I get to do this, and B, that there's people who want to be here to see me do this, And so it turns into, instead of, oh God, what are they going to think of me? Oh, I'm so nervous, being so about me, and takes that energy and turns it out to being more about giving out and saying, hey, there's people here, they've taken time, they've paid for the babysitter, they're tired at the end of their work day, and they're interested in just having a moment of either escaping from their life into a story or a concert, or just having a moment of real connection. So let me be here present in this moment and deliver this music or this story to them. And the only way I can do that is if I'm not all wrapped up, twisted in on myself about my own personal worries or fears about doing this. It's easier said than done. You're going to have days, of course, where either your body isn't working the way you want it to, or you're lost in your own thoughts, or, you have some problem in your personal life, and it's not always possible to just leave all that stuff at the door. But the more you do it, the more you can manage that stuff. So the energy thing, it's those 2 points for me. It's the 5 or 10 minutes beforehand that sort of make or break as far as getting my psychology in order about what I'm about to do. And then once you're on that stage, I frankly love it now, because it's the most present I sometimes feel in my life, because there's only that moment. You have one job to do. It has entered a somewhat meditative space to me, performing, because also what I do, singing, even in the music world, is maybe the most personal kind of music making, especially classical singing, because it's acoustic. We're not amplified. There's no microphone in between us. It is literally your body vibrating You're taking in air and you're vibrating these sound waves through your body, and they're hitting people outside of your body. They're hitting the little tiny ears in your eardrum. Those are vibrating based on what I do with my body. So it's an incredibly intimate, personal thing through this strange environment. I know that sounds kind of silly, but it's true. It's just true. It's the most personal connection someone can have in terms of the music world, because your instrument is you. And the blessing and curse of that is your instrument is going to change every day. You know, if you pick up your violin or you pick up your clarinet or something, that thing is the same. Okay, maybe you tune it, maybe you have different strings, but that's something outside of you that you're picking up to play with. But as a singer, it is literally you that you are using to communicate. And so you bring all of yourself to that. And so the energy question, I mean, it's defining energy can be, you know, quite literal in terms of electricity, or in terms of the energy that a sound wave has or a light wave has. But then there's the very abstract side of it, which is in performing. You know, you can get into a lot of sort of making up your own ideas of that, whatever works for you, in terms of your relationships with that energy, for yourself and for the audience. So that's, you know, I'm kind of rambling on about this, but it's a huge part of what we do as performers, is those two relationships: the relationship with yourself, how you handle that energy and the psychology around it, and then the relationship to the people outside of you.
So let me ask you, do you sometimes feel on stage that you go out of your body, that you, how does it? Yeah.
Not very often. People talk about this idea of something called flow state, where your sense of time changes, and like you're saying, out of body experience. I never had, like, you know, like you really leave your body and like you're floating and sort of going into some other dimension or something. I wouldn't go that far, but the flow state, in the sense that everything kind of feels automatic, and then your sense of time is totally screwed up. You'll get to the end of a scene or the end of a song or the end of a whole performance, and you'll say, wait a minute, what just happened? I felt like we just started, kind of thing. I think the only way you reach that is when you are fully prepared, like I mentioned, with the material, and then as present as you can be in that moment, energy-wise. And something can very quickly throw you out of that, you know. If one of your colleagues, or you know, the conductor in our case, or someone in the orchestra makes a mistake, and it happens, we're all human, that can sort of throw you off, because then you go out of that state, and if there's a mistake or there's a problem, then you go into problem solving mode, you know. What do I need to do to adapt, to change course, so that either literally we're safe physically on stage, you know, if something falls over or someone falls over. I've had some small accidents in my experience on stage, so that can throw you out of it, or musically, someone makes a mistake and you've got to help everyone get back on the same page. That can throw it all out. But the flow state thing, it happens very rarely. You know, it's something that I think we all strive for. It's what you go for. But it doesn't happen that often. And along those lines, just because you as a performer are having a profound, deep, out-of-body, moving experience, it doesn't mean that your audience is receiving that. And the exact opposite. Sometimes when you think, oh God, you know, I'm not connecting, I'm not in it today, I'm here on stage singing and I'm really thinking about what I'm gonna have at the pub afterwards, or I'm thinking about what I have to do at home, you know, it happens, right? some of those performances you'll finish, and then someone will come up to you and say, "Wow, you really moved me. That was such a lovely performance. It really was so honest." And in your mind, you're thinking, "Were we in the same place just now? Did we just have the same experience?" And one of the worst things you can do as a performer is think that your inner monologue, your psychological experience, good or bad, is the same that the other person is having. And I think that obviously is in life too, you know. Uh, so it allows you to. I think it's good to know that, because then you know that as long as you, like, I keep going back to this, have done your homework, have done your work, basically are doing a professional job, as long as you hit a baseline of quality, then whatever happens beyond that is going to change day to day. That's, in my mind, that's the difference between a professional and an amateur in anything, really. Is that a professional is built up experience and skills to the point that you're almost always going to deliver a professional quality product, and then that extra 10 or 20% above that is where you the difference between good enough, you know, yep, that was the job, got the job done, and then spectacular or special or unique or excellent. Yeah, so that's my sort of initial feelings about that.
What drives you every day to get up out of your bed and do this job?
Right now, it's very hard. Your question earlier about, moving to East Germany and being confronted with yourself, I think on some level, because of the world health situation right now, we're all asking some of those questions about what drives you, either in your job or even in your everyday life, what your priorities are. I am, generally speaking, someone who has a really hard time with unstructured open time, which is tough because a lot of the performing arts is what you'd say in English, feast or famine. You either have too many things to do or nothing to do, because there's a natural rhythm of the calendar of things. And then also, just most people in the performing arts, it's hard to put together a really consistent schedule all the time. So you're going to have periods of time that, in an ideal world, you would use that time to do all the things you don't have time to do other times. I mean, just artistically for yourself, you say, okay, great, I've got this month free. I'm going to, learn this new material. I'm going to work on my technique on these 3 different things and that kind of thing. Does that ever happen? Not usually. For me, and I was this way as a kid in school too. I mean, I did pretty well in school. I luckily was fairly smart, and academics were never an issue. But I was usually the person who was finishing the paper the night before, or like I said, trying to do everything in the busy time, and then when I had the free time, doing nothing. And at a certain point, I've stopped judging myself for that. Initially, I thought, oh, you're just lazy, or oh, you can't organize your time. And then now I'm starting to accept, you know what, actually you need that off time, because when I am working, when I am busy, I feel like I'm fully obsessed with that. By that, I mean, it's hard for me when I am working just to turn off the work brain. Ask me again your initial question, because I'm rambling off a little bit here.
What drives you every day to do your job?
Yeah. When I have a job to do as far as a contract, a specific project, I don't really need any extra motivation. There's sort of a structure for that. There's a natural time frame to that. There's deadlines. When you're doing an opera, you have a calendar of, by this date I have to be memorized. By this date we have to be on stage. By this, there's a day that's coming where you're going to be in front of an audience. So the job can give you a lot of structure. The flip side of that, where you need self-drive, you need self-motivation, is all of that other time. So in our field, for example, if you have a contract to do an opera that begins rehearsals on October 1st, when October 1st comes around, you already have to know that material, have practiced it, and have it memorized. And so all of that is up to you. And in most contracts, certainly freelance contracts, there's a clause that if you show up to that job and you don't know your material, they can fire you. They can let you go. And so the fear, frankly, is a lot of the driving factor. The fear of not being prepared, the fear of certainly in front of an audience not being prepared is what drives me to get up every day and do my preparation if I have a job on the horizon. If I don't have a job on the horizon, like right now, there's so much unstructured time. What drives me is the sense that it's a bit like, I don't know, playing golf or something. You're only playing against yourself. There's always more to learn. You're never going to finish learning it in this field. You're never a finished product. And so part of what, the times I'm happiest doing this job are when I am forced to feel like a beginner again. And you feel that way when you're learning new material. Certainly when you're doing something in a new language or a language you're not very comfortable with, you feel like an idiot. And that's good to have those moments where you feel naive, you feel lost, that kind of thing. And it naturally happens every time you get a new project because usually you're coming off of a previous project where hopefully it was a success and you feel like you've mastered that material. And now you've got to start at the bottom of a new hill and climb up again.
I would
So
like
that kind of,
Yeah, I would like to ask you a question from what you mentioned before. You said what you really learn on stage is that what you feel is not necessarily what the others feel as the spectators. What did this lesson teach you for life?
On a very basic level, don't take your own feelings, your own fears, your own anxieties so seriously. Because A, they're passing, they're always going to change. And B, they usually have nothing to do with what's happening outside of you. In a very direct way, it's usually like, hey, whereas in the past you think, oh, that person's judging me, or what's that person thinking about me? You need to realize that 98% of the time, the people around you really don't care about you. They don't care. They're not judging you. They're not being critical of you. They're not even thinking about you. They're just lost in their own little set of thoughts and their own set of psychology. And so basically, it's taught me to not take anything that seriously. And I think part of that is just growing up. I mean, a lot of that is natural with age, right? You think back to when you were a teenager, especially, and things that now, as an adult, you think, oh my God, I can't believe I got so worked up about whatever the problem was, that relationship in school or that, anything. It seems like when you're a teenager, your problems are like earth shattering. And now it seems so silly with that perspective. And so part of it is just natural. I'm sure a lot of it is chemical. As our brains develop and our brains fully mature, we gain some perspective. But also a lot of that is learned behavior. So anyway, trying to get back to what you really were asking is that learning that my psychology in a performance environment sometimes has nothing to do with what someone else is receiving is calming in a way. It's freeing in a way because you realize, hey, most of the time it's either not as bad as you think it is, or it's also not as amazing or good as you think it is. It just is what it is. And you're going to have your experience and someone else will have their experience. And it's not your job to control that,
Yeah. Jonathan, what is every role giving to you?
Every role, I think this all falls under the umbrella too of like, do you have a favorite role? Do you have a favorite kind of performing and that kind of thing? I don't really. Obviously, there are certain roles or certain pieces that you maybe initially connect with more. Either it's because you like that style of music. You know, even within opera and within classical music, we have all different kinds of styles of music from different parts of the world in different time periods. We do stuff from the 17th century and the 21st century, you know. So obviously, different roles are going to either feel more natural to you or just that you like more, you know. You're not going to like everything that you end up um, getting a gig performing. Um, in my experience, sometimes you need to move through that. Some of the things that initially you think, oh, I don't care for this music, I don't care for this material. At the end of the day, you end up actually liking even more because you push through that. Or some things are just more difficult and you have an initial, I don't know, maybe it's very human. If something is more difficult, you say, oh God, that's too much work, or that's too scary. Why don't I go over here and do this kind of music that comes to me more naturally? Examples of that would be, I as an American obviously know that singing in English is easier for me because there's no hurdle to get over as far as the language, and it's obviously more natural to me. Um, and then in singing specifically, your own voice is unique to you. It's only yours. It's no one else's. And so the way a piece of music is written might or might not fit well with your voice. And so you have to navigate that as well. Um, each role gives to me a chance, obviously, to be a little nerdy and sort of geek out or nerd out on whatever that subject matter is. I'm not saying I do this all the time, but in a perfect world, it's just like if you're researching a role as an actor. You are an actor as a singer. You're just acting through a music, through song. But each role gives you an opportunity to do a lot of research, and so you can go too far. You know, at a certain point, you've got to just do the thing. You can't spend all of your time doing research, or you'd never actually perform. But the coolest thing about this field is that it has such a variety of historical material that whatever piece you're doing, then you've got a whole world to get into. So, for example, um, you do an opera by Benjamin Britten, who was a British composer. I've done an opera called Billy Budd, right, which was a novella, a short story by Herman Melville. Okay, you read the novella, you read the book. Suddenly you're thrown into a world of researching 18th century British warships and maritime exploration. Okay, maybe that's interesting to you. Maybe you could care less, but you know what? You've got to do a certain amount of research on that if you're going to honestly play a sailor on a ship from that time. You have a piece like the Magic Flute, for example, the Zauberflöte. Okay, this is a piece that Mozart wrote the music for, but the text was all by Schikaneder, who was a famous actor, Emanuel Schikaneder, Austrian, I believe Austrian. I know the theater was an Austrian actor, who the role that I have done most often, Papageno, he was the first performer of that role, and he wasn't the greatest singer around. He was a sort of man of the theater, actor, and also sort of producer. And so how does researching him and researching why he wrote the role of Papageno the way he did, which is not vocally challenging, it's dramatically challenging, how does that play into what I do? You also then research, if it's a piece that's been done a million times, you have this funny balancing act of learning the tradition of how it's always been done, honoring that, and then also bringing your own ideas and your own version to that. And that's kind of unique to the classical arts, because other art forms, you're more often than not, you're creating something totally new every time. But in classical music or ballet or you know, classical theater, you're an interpreter more than you are a creator. And so each new role brings this big list of history with it, both in terms of the actual material and the way it's been done. And that can be really cool and exciting because it gives you a whole lot of material to get lost in. And by doing that, you then can create your own version of that. Some people, you know, for everyone it's different. Some people would like to do a whole lot of research, and you hear this a lot in some actors, you know, like Hollywood actors, film actors being interviewed. Some folks do a lot more crazy research, months on end. You know, I'm going to play a prison guard, so let me go spend a month in a prison following a prison guard or something. People are going to get totally lost. Others are lighter on the research, and they go more on instinct. And it's up to everyone to find their own balance for that, because what can get in your way sometimes is, especially in opera, is getting too caught up in how it's always been done before, or getting too caught up in, oh, it has to be exactly this way to be historically accurate. Okay. It's a balance between those two things. That's a very rambling answer, but the real truth is each role brings a different opportunity to learn a new subject matter, learn a new set of information, and also then to test your limits vocally as well, as far as who am I and how am I going to embody or fill the requirements of this material and this person that I'm playing.
In which role was the most Jonathan Mickey in it? Like, who you are?
um, Oh man, there isn't one role that immediately jumps to my mind. I will say that one of the roles that I felt most comfortable in now, strangely, is Papageno in Die Zauberflöte, even though it's in German. It's not in my mother tongue. I sometimes now have the most fun doing it, but part of that is not the role per se, it's just the repetition of it. One of the funny things about opera is that you end up repeating a lot of the same material year after year after year after year, because it's an art form that has this sort of core repertoire that's always done. And then you have on the sides of that, you have either new pieces, you know, brand new contemporary works being written, or you have pieces that just aren't as popular, maybe more obscure, that are done. But that core repertoire is the same. And so depending on your voice type, you have a certain list of parts that you're going to end up singing again and again and again. And for me, what they call my Fach, my type, it's a German word, but we use that in the opera field. What's your Fach? Oh, I'm a lyric baritone. I'm a coloratura soprano, whatever. Your Fach has its parts, and you have these core roles that you're going to end up doing all the time. So there isn't one part that is the most me, but the roles that you get to repeat over and over again become more you, simply because, kind of what we talked about before, you have less and less to think about. The more you've repeated something, the more it's naturally in you. You're not thinking about your music, you're not thinking about your text, you're not even thinking about your interpretation of the character, because you've done it so much that then you can be more yourself, because you are more fully present in that moment, because you're not thinking about the other stuff. So for me, Papageno, also because it is generally a very playful, silly, impetuous character that you can be stupid, you can be funny, you can be bored, you can be all of these emotions within that character. And then the only thing you're dealing with is how are my colleagues behaving around me? How am I a good colleague to them? Because it's a team sport in that way. And then whatever production we're doing, whatever concept the designer, the director has for this version, right? How am I serving that? Because the last thing you want to do is be some jerk who says, this is my character, this is my interpretation. I'm only going to do it this way. It's idiotic. You're there to serve the material, and you're there to serve the concept and the idea of the director, even if you don't like it. That's again something that I think is cool about the job. It's collaborative. It's a team sport. And you're going to be asked to do things that you don't always agree with, or you don't even always think is the right choice. But you're only one part of the equation, And by doing that, sometimes you say, yeah, you know what, I was right. That was the wrong choice. That was the wrong idea. I hate this. I'm glad it's over. Fine. Or you say, you know what, I never thought about it that way. I never would have tried that until someone forced me to do it that way. And that's what, again, sports and performing. I think a good coach in sports gives a player that perspective that only someone standing on the outside can have, and also maybe pushes that person in directions they wouldn't go to naturally. And in our world, the director is the coach in a way. The director has an idea of how we're going to do the show this way, and here are my players within that. And now I, as a director, have to deal with each of those players' own psychology, each of those players' strengths and weaknesses, and how I bring all them together to achieve the idea I have for the opera, or how we're going to play the game, or whatever. That's in our world, that's the parallel. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. So I'm doing my job and I'm being most myself when I am coming to that with a clear idea of how I want to present a character, while also being open to being told to try new things, do something that you wouldn't think of as the right choice, and seeing if it works. That's the best collaborative idea, a collaborative approach to the field that we're in. And I think that applies to life in general too. Knowing who you are, knowing what your priorities are in a project you're doing with people, or just an experience you're having, and being open to having those priorities shift or challenged, or defending your own version.
Jonathan, thank you for that. That was a really big insight. How do you feel after a show when it's all done and finished?
Usually, I'd put it in two categories. Luckily, I have not experienced in my life so far like a total disaster as far as a show that goes totally wrong, a total crash and burn moment. I had one show where I was injured and was taken to the hospital, so that was a disaster in one sense, personally. But luckily, I was injured on my last exit, so I had nothing else to do in the show. So I didn't ruin the show by literally falling on my face. But we can talk about that in a minute if you want. That also ties into the differences between Germany and America, which are interesting, because that happened in Germany and it would have gone very differently in America.
Tell me that difference.
Tell you that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is, again, I'm not passing total judgment, but what it showed me and what it made me appreciate was the German healthcare system and the German Krankenversicherung, German health insurance, versus America. It was here last year. We did a show called Rusalka, which is an opera by Dvorak, Antonin Dvorak, a Czech composer. It's the one piece I've done in Czech. We have what's called the Drehbühne, the rotating stage, turning stage, which allows you to do some really cool scenery changes, and it looks cool, right? You have this giant Drehscheibe, this giant rotating disc. The danger of that is it's a huge rotating piece of machinery that's not going to stop just because you fall on your face. So it was a performance where I was making my exit in a scenery that had a very uneven floor, and there was a lot of stage smoke, right? So it was dark, fake smoke on stage with lighting hard to see, whatever. I kind of got a little too into my action. I was running and in a maybe faster than I should have, and I just fell over this uneven stage, and before I knew it, all my body weight landed on my face, right here, in the dark with the rotating stage. And to the point where I didn't fully get a concussion, but I definitely sort of lost, my vision went funny for a moment. Managed to come off stage, but then I looked down and my whole hand is bloody and red. I'll spare you the details, but basically I had cut my nose and face a little bit on the floor, and then my top teeth had bitten into my bottom teeth, and that's why it looks so bad, because your face is very vascular, so you have so much blood flow here. So the point is, never once did I think, oh God, A, do I have health insurance? B, what is this going to cost me if they take me to the hospital? They're calling an ambulance. What am I going to have to pay for that ambulance? These are thoughts that Americans have. It's just the nature of our system, you know? Hopefully you're working at a place that has good work, insurance in the workplace in America to cover that. But even when you have good insurance in America, still now, and we're seeing this in COVID time, you grow up thinking healthcare is tied into the cost of it. Can I afford it? Do I have insurance at all? Because we have people in America without uninsured. And if I have insurance, is it even going to be effective? In Germany, you have this baseline insurance, baseline public level insurance that everyone has. Whether you have a job, don't have a job, rich, poor, you have the basic level of insurance. It's not perfect. I'm sure you can find examples of problems in the German system, but it takes away completely the idea of, am I going to put my health first? Am I going to put money first? So anyway, luckily I didn't have any permanent injuries from that, but I was able to go right to the hospital and get checked for concussion, get seen by a doctor in the Notaufnahme, the emergency room. And never once did I think, am I going to get a bill in the mail next week for $2,000 for the ambulance ride?
Yeah, definitely. Like Jonathan, definitely, I totally get you. I got a child here in America, so I totally know what happens when you have to go to the hospital, and then boom, boom, boom. So, and I understand completely where you come from, and thank you for this insight, because this one sentence, do you put the person, my health, or do you put the money first, I think says a lot. And it's not about judging America or Germany, just about, do you put yourself first? Are you the most important person in your life, or is the money the most important thing in your life?
Yeah, you and the people you care about, and again, that ties into the idea of, you as a German living in America, me as an American living in Germany. The biggest thing that happened when I moved is my definition of the word normal shifted. It changed. You realize that there is no one normal for anybody. It's defined by your culture and your country where you grow up. And so by living somewhere else, you see much more clearly the good and the bad of each place, And so very much by living over in Germany now, I see the real advantage of having a system where that's never a question, what we just talked about. the
And
money versus health thing.
how is it about people? How are people in America? How are they in Germany? For sure, every person is different. I don't want
Yeah.
to get you all in one box, but how do you feel with German people? How do you feel with Americans, and what are the differences in their bring up?
Like you said, huge generalization. You know, people are people, and there's different types everywhere. We know that, right?
Yeah.
In broad strokes, broad generalization, I feel like my experience in Germany in general is that things are a bit more structured and a bit more firm in that structure. People have for example, they have their job, and their job is within these lines, and I'm going to stay completely within these lines. And don't try to ask me a question that's just outside of that, because I won't answer it for you. So you see this manifest in bureaucracy, and bureaucracy is, you know, challenging everywhere. But in America, I feel like in general, people are more open to the idea of like, hey, you know, I don't know the answer to your question, or that's not my department, but let me call Dave over here. We'll figure it out. Like they're a little more flexible with improvising, I would think. And that's both in the workplace and I think more in life in general. They're a little more open to maybe that sort of the unknown. And you see that maybe as a reason why America in general is a good place to be an entrepreneur, is that there's a little more openness about not following the rules and not having to follow a very prescribed path. And in general, I've known from talking to friends who are Germans too, there's a little more of a reliance here on structure. And if you decide to do your education in this one thing, then that's it. You're going to follow this path. You're in this job, and it's harder to break out of that. Of course you can. Of course there's entrepreneurs in Germany. Of course there's, you know, but in general, it's much more rigid, I feel, and much more prescribed and controlled. And even in everyday life, people follow the rules more here, you know, which of course can be really good. But also it feels like some people maybe are more obsessed with order and systems here, which again is good and bad. I feel in general, like we've talked about, you and I've talked about a little bit personally in the past, is that I was told this before I moved here too. It takes more time in general for Germans to open up to you in a very personal way. But once people do open up to you here, it's very real and it's very honest, and you can count on the people. But you have to work harder to start those relationships. In America in general, I think people are very friendly. I mean, most Americans are happy to talk to you on the street. If you go into a shop or you go, you know, you're in public life in America, most people are friendly. But then you hit this funny point where you're saying, okay, are you really interested in me? Is this a real relationship that's being started? Or are we all just going through the motions of this is how we're supposed to behave to show that we're nice to each other, but you're not actually opening up to me? It's a weird thing that American openness and friendliness, I think in general is good. It's what I'm used to. But it's less clear than who are the people in your life who are your real close friends you can count on, and who are the people who are more just kind of passing superficial friends in name only. So that's one of the differences I noticed, is that in my experience in Germany, I'm talking about other Germans, because one thing in the opera world is I work with a lot of people who are from other cultures too. So it's a little different in that regard. But of the Germans that I'm friends with here, I have fewer German friends, but the friends I do have here who are German are very close. Whereas maybe in America, I would have many more friendship connections, but not as close.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah.
I think that's a great insight, and yeah, thank you for that. Let's go back to the question: how do you feel after a show?
Yeah. So the two things I think in general are either I feel incredibly um, overly critical and overly judgmental. That's one option.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah. Sometimes, and this I think to a degree can be good, but at a certain point it's a bit self-indulgent. Um, Sometimes I think I didn't achieve the result I wanted. I thought we as a team, my colleagues, that we weren't really working at our highest level together. Really, it didn't happen. And I'm thinking these things regardless of whether the applause is loud or not, regardless of whether my other colleagues think it went well or not. Sometimes I think it didn't happen, either personally or as far as what we achieved together. But that also now um, ties into what we talked about before. I've learned that just because I'm feeling that way doesn't mean that that's what everyone else thought, you know? So the good part of that is that you're critical because you always know that it could be better. It always could be um, more honest, or vocally you could have been more polished, or more whatever, whatever you wanted to achieve. It could always be better. So sometimes after a show, it's that. It's frankly disappointment, anger, confusion. In the past, I would let that bother me for 24 hours. Now it might bother me for 10 minutes. I think that's a healthy amount, because I think it says, okay, next time I want to fix this. I want to fix this. I want to fix this. It can be better. Let's go. And now get over yourself, let it go, and move on. That's one option. The other option is a kind of high. I think part of it is literally chemical. You have an endorphin rush, you have an adrenaline rush of the chemical change in your body and your brain. Runners talk about that runner's high. You reach a point, especially singing, because you are using your breath differently. You are having a different amount of oxygenation of your bloodstream, frankly. So much like athletes are breathing differently when they're doing it, singers are breathing differently, and your body is in a way more alive. So you can get kind of high on that. And then also, if things went well, you feel like, you really did a good performance, then you feel great about it. But I also have learned to not ride too far on that either. Enjoy it, acknowledge it, have a beer, whatever, great. Wasn't that great? And then you let that go, and you don't expect that the next time. Because I've also experienced one of the worst things you can do. It mostly manifests in the energy difference between the opening night of a new production and the second show. People talk about the second show blues. And there's something to that, because you work so hard to prepare something, then the opening night, the first night, has a special energy about it, right? The audience energy is different too. The worst thing you can do is have a great opening night and then show up the next day or 2 days later to do the second performance and expect that same experience and the same outcome again when everything around you is different. So anyway, those are the two reactions I have after shows, are those two, good and bad. And I've learned to not take either of them too seriously, and also then to either process them or enjoy them, and then put them away, and the next time start over, because you've got to find that again. That's the living, breathing art form thing. Is it's new, and it's only what it is for that moment, and you're only going to achieve success again by restarting each time, and not just expecting to stay at the level of what you achieved the previous time. It's impossible. It's impossible.
Thank you, Jonathan. What does applause mean to you?
Um, Applause in and of itself, like the level of clapping, like you had some kind of meter that goes up and down, doesn't mean very much to me. Because that changes, just like we've been talking about. It changes each time, and it's not always a reflection on what you did. What does matter to me as far as a response, applause is an audience response, you know? It's the way that we've decided as humans that we as a group can respond to something that we're seeing in front of us. Applause doesn't matter to me. That's always going to differ. What matters to me now is people's experience and reaction, and whether or not I affected someone genuinely or honestly. Frankly, I mean, I haven't experienced it very much, thankfully, but even if someone didn't really like the performance, I'm kind of okay with that now if it's because I or we as a production provoked a response in the person. You know what I mean? I'm not saying do something just to shock people for the sake of shocking them. But if you're doing something interesting and honest, people will have reactions and you can't control that. If you're doing something interesting and honest and artistic, for the sake of communication, presenting new ideas, then if someone has a reaction, good or bad, that's still good in and of itself. It's my opinion. You know, if someone makes a piece of art, of course, we've all seen people do things that seemingly it's just to shock people, seemingly just to get a reaction. That's kind of cheap, right? You see it in opera a lot. If you have something shocking like violence or sex or these extreme things in our lives, if you use them on stage just to shock people, people see through that and it's cheap. If you use them to tell a story or to communicate something fully, then it has value. And so applause, reaction, if it's honest and if it's heartfelt, that's all I care about. Because it means someone is being touched by what you're doing. Now, applause for the sake of how many bravos did someone scream at one performer, or does it somehow reflect on my self-worth or something? I don't care. And if that's why you're performing, I think you're going to have a really hard time psychologically over your career, because that stuff will go up and down. You know, anybody who reaches a high level in their field, it's almost impossible to stay at that level your whole life, right? So
what you're basically saying, it would mean much more to you if one single woman, for example, a man, after the show comes to you and says, oh, this and this moved me, or this and this didn't move me, than just 3 bravos. So an individual feedback would mean much more to you.
Individual feedback, yeah, and just a sense, you know when someone comes up to you and has had a profound or a genuine experience. The most meaningful thing with that is sometimes people are going to have experiences that you couldn't predict, but if you're giving them a chance to have a live experience in that moment where they're confronted with an honest performance, then that'll bring something out of themselves. And that's what matters to me, is having that human connection. And even more so now, frankly, Tobias, in this weird Corona time, where we are all doing as performers, either doing just things virtually or doing things for very small numbers of people, it raises a lot of those questions of, like you said before, why are you doing what you're doing, and then does it matter if you're performing for one person or 1,000 people? It's a little more difficult now, I would say, to, lose yourself in a performance. I would just say, from my experience, in June and the beginning of July here in Germany, we did do some performing, but it was very, very small concerts. So in our case, for example, here in Leipzig, we performed at an alternative space for, I think it was 45 or 48 people was the maximum number we could have, as far as the proper spacing, all these rules that are changing all the time right now. And it was a little harder at the beginning to do all these things I've talked about, as far as being an honest performer and opening up and all these things, because you're so worried about the strange environment and just in life in general right now. Everyone has this layer of dealing with this pandemic psychologically and physically, the health concerns, right? So it was a strange experience to do these performances for this small number of people. That was more difficult in some ways. And then on the flip side of that, I really loved it and appreciated it more, because I think all of us right now are recognizing the things in our lives that maybe we have taken for granted as, oh, we can always do that. Oh, that's just how it is. And everyone now is realizing, well, there's all these things, be it performing or seeing our friends or going out to the bar or whatever, social life, that is very precarious and can be stopped in an instant, as we know. So I think, we all hope that this will end very soon, that we can get back to quote unquote normal life. But normal life will look a little different. And performing life now too, being on stage, after going through this experience, there'll be a little bit more of that layer of appreciation for what we're doing, and that it can very quickly go away. And I think that in the end, that can be a good thing. Just the basic level of gratitude, gratitude for the opportunity to do it, and appreciation for the fact that I personally have been able to now work in a profession that's what I get to do, is be in front of people and tell a story. It's the bottom line.
Jonathan, how do you define the success?
Two ways for me. Success in the practical terms of, I want to hit a certain level with my abilities as a singer, as a performer, as an actor, so that my colleagues, people in the field, can say, yeah, hey, that's professional quality, right? So on the one hand, there's a baseline of what's considered professional. And beyond that, like we've talked about in this discussion, everything else is a matter of taste, a matter of opinion, a matter of someone else's perception. But most people can agree on what is professional quality in their field. So success for me is achieving that. And I think thankfully I have achieved that, as far as I know confidently that if I do the work I'm supposed to do, I can deliver a professional quality performance, right? So that's one kind of base level. The other side, which is much more difficult because it's not as clear, is what are my own goals for myself that will allow me to think, oh, I'm a success, regardless of whether someone else thinks I'm a success. And that's changing all the time for me. For me right now, success is a long career, longevity, that's consistently at a professional level, as opposed to hitting a real high level regardless of anything else. You know what I mean? So I have no interest in trying to become famous or trying to, I want to sing just at the top places in the world or that kind of thing. That would be great. And I'm trying for that, because that can be a sign of you improving. But there's so much that goes into that that's outside of your control. So much of that is luck and timing and right place, right time, and all that kind of thing. And also, a lot of people, friends of mine I know, who have achieved some of that real top level in our field, it's not like it gets any easier. If anything, it gets harder. Because with the higher level of outward success, celebrity or prestige, you are held to a higher level, and you have to maintain that. The higher you climb, or the what's the phrase? The higher you climb, the harder you fall, kind of thing.
But Jonathan, can I ask a question? So you talked about a lot of success in the outside.
Mm-hmm.
What is success in the inside for you?
For me, it's what I said. It's knowing, which thankfully I think I've achieved now. Knowing that I am doing my chosen job at a professional level is success. And I think I've achieved that. And now it's just a question of maintaining that, right? You have to do your work to stay at that level or improve. And then the harder thing for me, the success, is longevity, doing this the rest of my life as long as I'm physically able to. And then not allowing myself to get complacent or lazy, for lack of a better word. Not allowing myself to just sit back and rest. So I'll be successful if I keep testing new things for me, new languages, new styles of singing, and new roles, new ideas for how to perform. That's a success for me. I have no interest in the feedback of other people anymore, except for people who I respect and who I know me, who I've built a relationship with. I value their feedback because it's a way of pushing me and testing my limits, like we talked before. Critique from people who don't know me is of very little interest to me. So my idea of success is those things, and it's living up to the expectations of the people who I have a vested relationship with, a vested interest in. That's success.
Jonathan, where and when are you happy?
I am happy. This ties into the idea of being present and a little bit of the meditation stuff. I think I'm happiest when I feel most present in the moment or in the place where I am. And it doesn't happen very much, frankly. I wouldn't say, I don't have extreme changes in my emotion. I don't feel like I go extremely up and down, but generally speaking, melancholy or in the gray area is where I live most of my life. And then the extreme highs and lows are rare. But I'm happiest when I'm present, basically. And that's on a very basic level. And in my personal life, that can be when I am, certainly like with my wife and stuff, some of the happiest memories are when we've gone on vacations or on trips that take us out of our normal life and allows you to be just in the new place. There's something exciting about that. That's why I love travel in general, is that going to a new place, it's like the colors are brighter. You're forced to be more aware of everything around you. And that could be some of the happiest times because you're so present in that moment. So that's when I'm happiest, either in professional life or personal life. When I am present, I'm not thinking about the past, I'm not thinking about the future. And when I'm experiencing something new. I think that's how I would define it for myself. It's hard to define, it's a hard thing to define, but that's just the sense memory of when I felt that overwhelming joy is because of those reasons.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. How do you think about love? What is love for you?
Love for me, I mean, the dictionary definition has many different facets, right?
Don't come up with a dictionary, please. What me
I'm
does
not. I'm not. I'm not reading the dictionary. I promise. Love for me, it ties into what we just talked about. When you're in love, when you're loving someone else, when you're loving yourself, more importantly, because if you don't love yourself, you can't love anyone else. Is when you are fully present with your in that moment for yourself, and then with another person. Because by being present, by being honest, you can feel that love and express it and give it to someone else. So I honestly, Toby, I haven't thought that much about these different things as far as the connection between them, but they all kind of circle around a lot of the same nucleus, around the same center, which is that idea of being fully in the moment allows you either to fully experience love, be open to it, because you're not distracted by your thoughts, you're not thinking about something else, you're there to take it in, and also to give it to someone else, whether that's a loved one in your family or tying it in to the work stuff, to performance, giving someone an honest emotion. If that honest emotion is love, you can't fake it.
How does
You
love
know,
feel for you?
love feels for me like belonging, and by that I mean there's no other place or there's no other person I should be with, and that doesn't happen very much. It's really hard to find. But I would say that's the closest thing to belonging, and to love is belonging. Something feels right, and it's so hard to define that. It's hard to put that feeling in words, as we know. But that's the best I can come up with as far as love is belonging, um, and the sense of being where you should be and with whom you should be with. Um, so the moments when I feel real love is when I know that I'm where I belong. Um, and luckily, I recognize, a lot of people go through their whole life not either ever feeling that or feeling that very infrequently. And I think that's one of the differences, of course, between having loving relationships, if you're lucky to have them, is acknowledging that and appreciating that, and then also loving what you do. Um, is the difference between a job and a career. You're only going to have a career if you find something that you can have those moments, even if it's very infrequent, of feeling that love because you're doing what you should be doing. And people either never find that or they never are able, because of all kinds of reasons, to make that the center of their life and make a living at it. So when I feel those moments that are very infrequent in what I do, it's even more of a reason to appreciate that I've chosen a profession where I'm allowed to feel like I belong.
Jonathan, thank you for this insight. I think that was yeah, a deep explanation. Um, I have a question for you. This podcast is called Eye Level Podcast.
Yeah.
What does eye level mean to you?
I'd never heard of that phrase before. You told me that's what it's called. Eye level. What does eye level mean to me? The first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is eye level in the sense of looking someone directly in the eyes. We have that phrase that the eyes are the windows to the soul. I just learned on another podcast the other day that somehow your eyes are technically part of your brain. Like, don't ask me, I'm not a scientist, but that it's literally like your eyes are connected to your brain in a way that no other part of your body is. And so eye level, when you allow yourself to look directly in someone else's eyes, it's maybe the most vulnerable, the most open you can be, and the most direct you can be with someone, is what comes to me when you say that. But if eye level is sort of a concept, I'd never really heard of that before. But it's interesting to me too. I just watched a great show the other day on Netflix, called, I believe it's called Love on the Spectrum. It's an Australian show about people who are on the autism spectrum trying to find love. And it's very clear when you watch these people interact. Of course, people on the spectrum, they have different amounts of social anxiety or social issues. One of the hardest things for them to do is to look someone directly in the eyes. And that's why those folks have challenges in life, is because they're not able to read the social cues in the same way that most people are. And so it's scary, right? To look someone directly in the eyes and to hold that focus. But it's the only way that you have a true connection with somebody. There's my ideas of eye level. Tell me, is there like a psychology around that or something? This eye level idea?
Just a Toby Nubbermeyer psychology about it.
Good. Oh, that's good.
And
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. I'm not studied. I don't publish that. I just have my opinion about eye level and how important it
Yeah.
is. So,
But people, no matter what, you're going to have a reaction. Is that right? If you look at someone in the eye, it's going to cause a reaction. Yeah?
I asked this question now often, and I'm honest with you, I never got such an answer like you, with this really focusing on the eye, because the eye level is basically something when you're not putting yourself above or underneath somebody, and not
yeah.
So basically, how often people define it for themselves. So everybody has their own definition, and I'm fine with that.
Sure.
Because it's like everybody has a subjective view on it. So it's about like what you said about self-judging yourself. It's about like, oh, I did that wrong. So you don't feel on eye level with yourself. Maybe you don't have the self-love for yourself or for another person. But what I really liked about your thing is this explanation when you said it's a window to your soul, the eye. When you really get time and really look into the eyes of somebody, you really are deep in the moment, what you said about meditation, when you really acknowledge what the other person is and listen to the other person, what basically we are doing in this podcast, then you get to a point of a relationship on the level of talk and connection, also energetically and emotionally, what really gives you something. So I'm really touched by your explanation. That was really I really liked how you see the world. Yeah, that was a great thing. Yeah,
it's a nice way of putting it though, eye level. And you're right. The way you just described, as far as that vertical eye level. Of course, I see that idea as well. And it just boils down to confrontation. I don't mean in a violent way or a negative way, but confronting the person in front of you in the eyes, or yourself in the eyes. For some acting training stuff, a lot of acting training stuff has to do with getting comfortable in your own body, right? Because whether you're acting in a play or an opera or whatever, you are taking up physical space and you're using your body, right? I mean, you want to develop a sense of your body that is as aware as possible, so that you can tell the story you're trying to tell. Because half of the story you're telling, I mean, I guess in real life too, with our body language, we're telling a story with our words, but half or more than half of the story we're telling is with our bodies and with our faces. And so some acting exercises are literally sitting in front of a mirror, which can be very painful, and staring at yourself in the mirror for a long time. and dealing with whatever those feelings are that come up, whatever those judgments are that come up. And of course, the first time you do it, you think you're going crazy, right? But you need to do that. And then beyond that, you know, some actors do that because you can't see yourself through your own eyes, so you need a reflection to see what you're doing with your face on a very basic level, right? If you're trying, especially film actors, because you can tell a whole story with the movement of one eyebrow or one change of your smile. So you need to see how that instrument works. But it can be frightening to confront yourself in that way, but it's the only way you're going to move through all those feelings and become a better version of yourself. So,
How would you connect eye level and love?
I guess only by saying what I said before is that the only way you can truly love yourself or someone else is by being fully present. And you're not really going to be fully present if you're looking above yourself, below yourself, or not at yourself or that other person. So if your eye level is always changing, or if you have a fear of staying at the middle eye level, the direct eye level, then you're also going to be afraid of love, because love is not just warm, happy feelings. Love is not just good times. Love is this basic thing we're talking about, being fully present and being willing to be fully present no matter what happens, whether that's with yourself or with the other person. You don't love someone if the moment things get difficult or get hard, you run away or you look away. And you don't really love yourself if you're not willing to look at the good and the bad. So that's how I would connect eye level and love, is that you can't have love and you can't love someone else or something else, your job, your life, if you're not willing to spend time at eye level with it. I guess is how I would say it.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah.
Yeah.
One more question. You're sitting in front of this mirror in your acting practice.
Hmm.
Is shame coming up? Like where
Oh my God, yeah. Sorry, shame, and it's different emotions, negative emotions, yeah?
Yeah. So how do you feel about this shame? What is coming up? How do you deal with
Now I'm okay with it. It'd be interesting if we had this conversation 10 years ago, it would be a whole different conversation. Um, and I'm sure if we have it 10 years from now, which maybe we will, it would also be a different conversation, right? That's interesting. Now I'm okay with all those emotions. I'm still affected by them. I still have hard times, of course, but I've done some work with meditation and with there's mainly the ways I've gone about studying a bit of meditation is some reading, and also there's two apps I've used. One is called Headspace and one is called Waking Up. And they just go walk you through some of the basic concepts of mindfulness meditation. One of the most useful tools I've found for myself and for my job is an idea of noting. Noting whatever comes in, be it a thought, an emotion, or something outside of yourself, a sound, a smell, something you see. You say, oh, that's interesting. I just heard this sound, or that's interesting. I'm feeling shame, like you said. I'm feeling anxiety. I'm feeling tired, whatever. You say, oh, okay, I've noted that, and then you let it go. And you don't stay in that shame or in that emotion. You don't stay spinning in it, because then you turn what is a natural thing that's outside of your control. You can't control when those emotions come up or when those thoughts come up. You turn it into a monster. You turn it into something bigger than it actually is. And whether that's in your own life, your own fears, your own psychology, or certainly when you're performing on stage, You don't want to let those things get out of control, because all that's going to do is take you out of the present moment of what you're doing and where you are. So when I'm sitting there at eye level, looking in the mirror, I don't do that so much anymore. That was more back in the day in school with some acting exercises or just sort of body awareness. But the most painful thing for me still is to listen or watch a performance that I did, which is very important to do. It's like athletes watching tape of their game, right? You've got to do it, because then you're going to see how you approach the ball. You're going to see your stance of your swing of your bat. You're going to see whatever. In our case, you see the posture of your body, the expression in your face, all these things. And it's usually an incredibly painful thing, because you're confronted with all of your flaws. You're confronted with all of your self-judgment. You're confronted with all the things that you know are your instincts, good or bad. And I think we in general are quick to see the negative, and it's harder to see the positive, which is why it's so, you do a show and 10 people say wonderful comments to you, and one person says a negative comment to you. You're going to remember the negative comment, even though it's 1 out of 11 things. And somehow take that more seriously than all the positive. So that's the hard thing, watching tape of yourself. You focus on the negative, but only by focusing on the things you're not happy with can you change them.
So first of all, thank you for the insight, because it was the same for me. When I first, it was a couple of years ago, I first filmed myself while I was coaching and did a presentation, and I felt like, holy shit, like I for 5 days I didn't want to touch this video, and then I finally touched it, and then I thought like, oh, that's not bad. So you might not be a bad coach, so it's all right. So and then you go after, and then you're getting used to that. But you're definitely right. You have to go through this process of confronting yourself with yourself, and videotape is such a great source. Also in soccer and coaching, it's like if you videotape your own sessions, if you videotape your own like talks with your team, it's like such a powerful instrument to getting better and to understand yourself better. So I completely get what you say.
It's valuable too. Like in your context as a coach, you're in many ways a teacher, right? And I don't teach personally. I haven't, maybe at some point I will, but I haven't taught singing yet. But I know a lot of friends who do say, of course, they learn more about their own singing and their own performing by teaching it. Of course, because you have to communicate things you maybe have never really thought about, because we all have things that come more naturally to us than other things. So it forces you to try to put those things in words. And then, like you're saying too, you've got to I think in a good way. And initially it's hard, because you just, like you said, you see all the bad things first. But then, like what I said before, the more you do it, the more you realize, okay, I know what I'm doing. Okay, I'm professional. You know, you watch the video, you see that, and then you say, here are the 4 or 5 things that I'm still going to keep working on. I had a really good teacher in college who was good about that. One thing I still take away is, she called it doing your chores, but basically doing your tasks, picking no more than 3 things, never more than 3 things, for your performance. To say, today, I'm going to focus, in my case, I'm going to focus on the use of my breath. I'm going to focus on this one aspect of the language I'm singing in, and I'm going to focus on how my feet are feeling in the floor, how I'm standing in my shoes. And you just do that. And by picking these 3 things, you block out all the other noise, and you also give yourself small successes. So at the end of a performance, whatever happens, however good or bad you think it is, you say, you know what? Good job. You stood evenly today. You breathed the way you've been practicing today. It gives you focus, and it also gives you a little bit of positive reinforcement. And then you put that away, and next time you pick 3 new things, So it's this funny balance of being self-critical Being critical of yourself. Good. Yeah. Because you're never done. There's always more. But don't get lost in that. Don't be overly self-critical. Don't be overly negative or shameful, like you're saying, about your performance or your work. It's a balance. It's a balance.
Yeah, I think, Jonathan, we could do a workshop with football coaches and people on stage, and it's like there's so much interconnection, so much learning from each other. Like I also like, I think like sitting in front of this mirror for 10 minutes, and after, like, the shame is coming up, like telling you stand up, go away, and you sit there, and you have to let your shame go. And it's the same way in your daily life. You think about, oh, I should do a podcast, I should do that, and then your shame is coming. Oh no, what do the others think? Don't do that. Like, that's not what you're supposed to do. Society is not. So it's holding you back so much. But I
Yeah.
think there's this little things like this mirror exercise. I love it.
You
Just to
have
get
you
touch of.
have to go through it. You have to go through. You can't go around. You can't run away. You have to go through. And easier said than done, of course. I don't always do that, of course. These are the goals. One last thing I'll say around this, along with the idea of looking at yourself or recording yourself. In our context, when you take a voice lesson, you work with a voice teacher just on the technique of the singing. The most important thing to do is to also record that, because the psychology of when you are the student in that room doing the lesson, it's very hard to actually learn anything in that moment, because you're kind of ripped open in the lesson or in the coaching session. And the job of the coach or the teacher is to work on the problems. The job of that person is to find solutions to what's not working. You wouldn't pay someone to just say, oh, yes, you're wonderful, keep going. But it's a very difficult environment. So if you record, if you just do the lesson for the hour, okay, and you feel what you're going to feel, you do what you're doing, and then at least one day later, don't do it right away, because you don't have any distance from it. 1 or 2 days later, go back and listen. I feel like that's when you actually learn the most, because it's amazing how when you listen to yourself or you watch yourself, you immediately go back to that moment when you were doing it, but now you have a different perspective. So now you can actually hear what the teacher is saying. You can actually step back and say, oh yeah, I was doing that. Because maybe in that lesson, you're going to get defensive, or you're going to say, oh, no, they don't know what they're talking about. Or, it's just today, I'm fine. It's so important to both let yourself go in that moment, be the student, feel lost, feel stupid, feel angry, and then go back to it and say, all right, now what am I going to learn from that, and how am I going to move forward from that? That's the way that I personally have made the most progress in my technique in what I do. And it's also the hardest thing to do.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. What is the change you would like to see in the world, Jonathan?
All of these questions are bigger now because the world feels so much more fragile. I guess the biggest thing I think that I would like to see changed in the world is people's ability to listen. I feel like we don't really listen that much to each other anymore, because we're already thinking about our response, or we're already thinking about essentially which team we're on, how we want people to think of us, whether that's, does our opinion match to that person's or not? Do we especially with social media and all that stuff, it's so quick to give your opinion, quick to give your answer, that we don't listen. I know that sounds so simple, but it's true. I think if we listened to people in a longer sense of time, we would understand that most people are good people, that most problems can be solved among people. But it's not what we do naturally now. We want things to be fast. We want to be right. and we want to give a quick answer and to look good in giving that answer. And that's not really the solution. And now, when so many people are alone or have just so much more time that's slower in a way, although I don't know about you, I feel like this lockdown time, or this time of being fairly locked down, is actually going quite fast for me. The fact that it's August now is a bit shocking to me. So ironically, your sense of time shifts in that regard. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. The point is, change in the world for people to listen more and to take a bit more time to respond is what I want to see. And I can take that personally into myself too by being a better listener, which I have not always been. Sometimes I talk way too much. I mean, part of what we're doing today is really to have me talk. So it's funny because it feels a bit wrong, a little bit, because I've worked very hard in the last, really, since I've gotten married, frankly, but since I met someone in my life who's, my wife and I we're very similar in many ways. We're both musicians and we met working together, but we're very different personalities. And for me and for us, it's good. I think for me, finding someone who I want to spend my life with, and part of what I was attracted to her about is that she's very different than me. And the best that comes out of that is that it makes you see the parts of yourself that maybe could change. And you also are allowing someone else to see the parts of themselves that can change, and you have that yin and yang, that give and take. And so sitting here talking to you now, which is great because we know each other and I'm happy to do it, is probably the most I've talked about myself in a long time. I used to talk too much about myself.
So you judge yourself on talking about yourself?
Yes, because it used to be the defense mechanism so that I wouldn't have to deal with empty space. I want to fill the empty space.
Okay.
We've talked, I remember talking about this with you in person sometime in the past. It's hard for me to sit in silence, so I fill it with talking. Now I've learned either to enjoy that silence, or at the very least, to ask someone else a question and to talk about something else. I think that's part of being a good partner in conversation, is that. So anyway, more listening, less talking, except for right now.
Jonathan, what was the most formative moment in your life?
I don't know what day it was, but the moments when I was young, when I started doing music and performing, I never for once questioned it or doubted it. It's just something that you find and it's like a fish in water. You just take to it. So for me, and which is why I feel so privileged and grateful that I've now made it a career, even though it doesn't mean it's easy. It still feels like a job sometimes. But I was able to find something that I just naturally took to, and never once did I doubt, am I doing the right thing? And for me as a kid, I was as a little kid, I played piano, I played saxophone, and I sang in a church choir, school choir as a very little kid. And then when I became a teenager, I got more into acting and singing as the main thing. But the formative time was just finding something. I mean, how does that happen, you know? It's like you find something that you just take to it. But luckily, I had people around me, parents and like teachers and stuff, who then said, okay, go in that direction. We'll support you. So not everybody gets that. You know what I mean? So at the beginning level, the formative level for me, that was it, was finding this thing. And I would just put that under the umbrella of performing. For me, it's music mainly, but performing being a thing that gives you a sense of, wow, this is where I belong. Let's go in this direction. Yeah.
There was a quote from Roger Doney in the Post Alley. He wrote, "Mickey, a nimble string bean in shrieking red velvet, is a born clown." So what part in you is a born clown?
Yeah, this ties into one of my biggest strengths and weaknesses on stage. Here, you found it in that quote. I love performing, and I love big gestures and big motions. But the minute I'm feeling insecure and the minute I'm feeling like I don't know if something's going right, I do more. You know what I mean? So I'll do more over the top gesture. Maybe I'll go too far into acting. So that clown kind of thing, the clowning thing is that sort of the idea of the sad clown too, is that it's really someone who's very sad hiding behind this clown. There's one of the most famous operas is called Pagliacci. And there's a famous piece from it everyone would know if they heard it. And it all centers around this sad clown. It's just sort of this archetype. So the clowning thing, yeah. My instincts, which can be very good, my instincts as a performer are to go big, to go broad. And sometimes you need that and you want that. But sometimes you do it as a way of defending yourself because you're feeling insecure. See, but there you go, right there. That's a quote from a reviewer who saw me on one day in one context, and that was his impression that he wanted to write in a review. And I think it's true, because I know which piece he's talking about doing that, and it's an over-the-top comic opera. But born clown. Yeah, born performer, I guess. I would say that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for all that. Now I gave you a lot of questions. Do you have a question for me in the end?
Well, and the biggest interest to me right now, because of how we met each other and now your experience, is the flip side. I remember before you moved, you were asking me, we were talking a little bit about some of the cultural differences between America and Germany. And of course, you know, who knows how long you'll be in America, and when you get to travel more there, you'll see the big differences in the different parts of the country. But what's your experience so far? It's been about a year, yeah? Roughly a year for you? Maybe in your job, but just in general, about like the same thing I talked about as far as expectations versus your actual experience of this first year there. I mean, for you, I know the language wasn't as big of a thing because you already speak English, but maybe more culturally, what you expected versus what you've experienced.
Yeah, I had to learn some things. So the first thing I definitely learned, when everybody's very, very friendly, very, very nice in the first plant, but the problem is they're also very friendly if they have a problem with you. So basically you don't feel like, in Germany there might be a guy like not looking at you and you know, okay, you have to speak to this guy because he is angry at whatever happened to you, to him, whatever. So yeah, there are not this like signs of, okay, he's friendly, but what's really, is something bothering him or not? You know what I mean? So that's, I think that's something what is more hidden here, what I experienced. The other thing is, what I really experienced in the beginning was that a lot of people are not comfortable like getting other people to their homes. I have the feeling sometimes that they don't want to show weaknesses in their family, whatever. For example, the kid is 10 years old and might not be perfect, and they don't want that anybody else sees that. So that was a bit of my feeling, that it wasn't that easy to get an invite, for example, to go somewhere, but it's normal when you're the guy from Germany. It's that's a different topic. So what I really experience over time, you can really build profound and good relationships, but it needs time, and really you need to get down these barriers. So that was a big thing. The other thing I really learned here was a big thing in coaching and also in looking at the things, because I'm born as a German perfectionist with always seeing the mistake and what can I improve, how can we do better. I'm very ambitious in getting the best out of the team and everybody, and then in the end the American way is often, oh yeah, it was good after every practice, yeah, good job, good job, good job, good job. So there's a bit of, okay, I felt like, okay, it's not always good, but you just give yourself this feeling of that's good, and that makes everybody being on a wave of enthusiasm and of, okay, we want to win together, we want to be a team together, just by saying good job, good job, good job. And I had to learn that both ways in combination get a really good team, but you can't spare one-on-one. Like if I'm too much in my German mindset, I'm getting too much into this only focus on failure, but I'm also, if I'm just going into this American mindset and saying good job, good job, good job, it's I'm missing the really good things to maybe correct or getting better at. So it's combining both assets. That's basically what I feel. And I will not generalize because everybody's different here. I experience so much different personalities, but to this experience of combining these both assets together and say, okay, I do the best out of it for me as a person. And I feel that's why I'm here in this country, to learn that and to adapt to that. And I think it's not by accident that I landed in America.
No, I'm really happy to hear that's what you've experienced so far, because I think that's for anybody going to any country that I would agree. It's important, even if, you could have shown up there and hated it and you say, okay, well, there's a year or two of my life, I hated it, I go back to Germany, but you still would have learned a whole lot and you would have changed no matter what, because you were willing to leave what you know and to try something that is foreign in every way. Are most of your players, are they all American? Is there a mix of backgrounds? Is it all American players that you're coaching?
Yeah, like, Americans are a lot of immigration behind it. So it's a very mixed, I have very mixed groups, black and white mixed completely. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And, but they're all American passports. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So culturally it's that context.
Yeah. But in America, it's like such a broad culture. So you have so many Hispanic, Mexican, you have the African, like it's all mixed up. So, and then you have all the guys from Europe who came here and second, third generation. So it's like, I don't have the feelings that that there is a real American. There's more for me, like an American with a lot of, like everybody tells me, oh, I'm half Polish. My grandmother is from Germany. So it's like, I feel like this country is, you know what I mean?
Isn't that funny that we, even generations along, we still say where our ancestors were from.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the beautiful things when it works well, and it's one of the beautiful things about America is that even though we have issues in America with racism and all these things, it still is a beautiful place as far as people mixing when it works, like you're saying. Yeah, like I still say my background is German and Scottish. That's ancestors from over 100 years ago. I'm American, but we still have that idea. That's cool. And then that's very different than what you experienced in Germany. Yeah. I mean, like the idea of what it means to be German. Obviously, there's a lot of diversity in Germany too, but there's a different relationship to that background. Yeah.
I think, to be honest, it's not that different. It's just like now I'm the German in America, and that's a big difference because you yourself are the foreigner. So that's like that's completely shift. Like that also changes your perspective. You can't compare that really because, for example, I had a team in Germany, in Hamburg, in Dortmund. I had 9 different nationalities, everything: Bosnia, Russia, Syria, every nationality, like Turkish, every kid from different backgrounds, Polish, whatever. And but I was still the German guy in Germany. So I was like, but I looked at them and I laughed. This year was a great year. But on the other hand, now I'm the German guy in America, so I'm the foreigner. So it's a complete, you can't compare anything. It's complete, but it's so interesting to understand that.
One more question for you along these lines. Do you find yourself, of course, people have questions, I'm sure, about Germany, about Europe, and that perspective, just like I get here to answer questions about America. But do you find yourself not defending, but sort of having to explain your personality, explain your approach to coaching? Like have you had any experiences so far where it just doesn't work?
So I didn't have to explain anything. The only thing what was funny is when I sometimes hear from parents, like when they speak about the kids or whatever, I heard like one quote that was cool. They said, "Oh yeah, that's a guy from Germany. He communicates different." So, and the good thing is like I don't judge that, because it's like it can say, "Oh, he communicates bad," but it's like
it's
just
different.
Yeah, it's just different, and it's right. It's like it's completely right. It's like, and I don't explain that. It's like it's just I'm the way I am. I do and whatever. I have a German passport, but I don't see us people like, oh yeah, that's a German dude, that's an American dude. I'm more like, you're a person, you're a human being, but you have a passport from this and this country, and that's maybe where you have some relationships and bondings to, but that's not you as a person. You as a person, you're unique. You don't have to do anything with nationality. So basically, that was something I really appreciated. I thought like, okay, that's cool. That's just how it is. It's different.
It's great. I think maybe, I know I feel this way, maybe you feel this way too. One of the coolest things about the job I'm doing is that you are always in a mixture of kinds of people, mixture of nationalities and all that stuff, and everyone does bring something else to it. And so you end up having very interesting, the sort of alchemy of bringing everyone together. It's interesting. And obviously now, yeah, if, when or if you come back to Germany, then now you will coach differently than you did before.
Exactly.
Not better, not worse. Just you have more tools. You have more perspectives.
It broadens your horizon a lot. It's like I'm the same like you. Like it gives, like for your personal growth, it gives so much to get into a certain new perspective. And like, for example, now I'm in America, and when the whole thing with Corona, everything happened in Germany, I wasn't like, also like before when I was in Germany, I was like, I thought like, okay, I was so into the Bundesliga and all this stuff. And then now in America, and you'll think like, okay, that's cool. I just follow it a bit, but it's like, it doesn't affect me anymore that big. Or like, oh, there's another change of a coach, like they change his coaching every time. It's basically what they do. And it doesn't affect, it's like, okay, cool. Okay, he does his way. Okay, cool. It's like, you don't compare yourself anymore to any of these coaches in the environment, because you just stepped ahead. And then you feel like, why did I compare myself the years before to other coaches in Germany? Why just be like I am? Because now I'm in America, I don't care. And like, I just wish everybody the best, but I don't compare myself anymore to any German, like saying, oh, this guy and this dude. It's like, it just went into a complete new perspective.
That's cool. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it allows you were stuck in the world here.
Yeah.
It's all you know. That's the world, and then you step out of it and you say, oh, okay. I can actually, not get, you don't get caught up in all of the comings and goings of that world. Yeah, it's cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So and you also learn to appreciate Germany, because now in America it's everything different. So you mentioned the health system or whatever. Like, you appreciate a lot of things in Germany much more now than you did before, but you also understand that that's Germany, and that's not the edge of the world. There's so much more in the world, and like, for me it was so important to get out of this country for a longer time, to understand things and to learn about myself and about this culture thing. So I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful for this experience, and I'm also very grateful for this podcast. Actually, it's so interesting. It's like so funny. We met in Leipzig, and now I'm in America. You're in Germany. It's crazy.
It's great, and I really applaud you for doing that. And I think, but you also you have a personality that is that is maybe ready to change, ready to experience a new thing. You know, not every person is able to do that in the same way. But in the end of the day, I think no matter how long you stay in America, if you stay there for 2 years or 20 years, who knows? Um, Speaking for myself, after a certain amount of time, you kind of don't fully belong anywhere. You're going which can feel strange, but it ultimately is good. I think you're going to see more things that you prefer in America and more things you miss about Germany as the time goes on. And then when you come back to Germany, even just to visit family or whatever, you have a few days where, you know, just practically say, oh, I can speak German. I can communicate naturally, fully. You know what I mean? And oh, I can go to my favorite, eat my favorite, you know, go to my favorite places I used to go to. But then you're going to be like, oh, I miss these people. I miss this thing about America. Oh, I'm, you know, you're going to develop this strange identity that doesn't really belong anywhere, but also belongs everywhere. And so you'll feel more adaptable for anything, which is really great. And it's kind of a blessing of having a job that allows you, you know, to work in different places. That's something that not a
And
lot of people can do.
I think you're right. What really comes obvious to me right now is like when we speak now about the American culture, it's just through my eyes. So basically, I came here and I just experienced the role of being a foreigner. Like I could also maybe go to Timbuktu or to Russia or whatever, but I chose America, and maybe this context is special in this way, but I just experienced my way of being a foreigner. For example, what I addressed to you, like I don't feel like people are so open to invite yourself to their home or whatever, but that's maybe
Yeah,
just a choice of a foreigner instead of just a choice maybe of America. But it's both mixed, you know. It's like it's so interesting. Yeah.
it's cool. Do you feel just in your field, in football and soccer? Uh, I, it's the one sport honestly I didn't follow much. My big sport has always been baseball. Um, Actually, my team is the Philadelphia Phillies. So you're right nearby there. From growing up outside of Philly. And right now, baseball is trying. I don't know if how much you read. Baseball has started their season again. Is really trying to play a shortened season in this Corona time, and already after 4 games has hit a major problem with mainly the Florida Marlins, but because they were in Philadelphia playing the Phillies, those two teams have now been unable to play for a week. The Marlins are still in Philadelphia. They've been stuck in Philadelphia. And so you're seeing how quickly things can even the best laid plans for controlling this can go out the window. Obviously, we hope it improves, but like in your field too, in soccer, do you think you're going to have a full season this year, or you make your plans and you hope it works, I guess?
To be honest, I just I just live every day,
Yeah,
and in the most case, I want to live it as was it is the last day I have. So I
good.
there's a moment when you stop making plans, and I think a pandemic is a good moment to do that if you didn't do that before. And yeah, for sure, you have some long-term thinking of okay, that it might look like this, but to be honest, like I just enjoy every day as much as I can, and I do what I can do, and I just yeah, I just when we come back to training, I just enjoy every day of having this experience, and whatever the conditions are, I do the best out of it. There are people in prison incarcerated every day, 24 hours, maybe not seeing the sunlight a lot, but they
Hmm.
can choose every day. Am I a happy in prison person or I'm an unhappy in prison person? So
Yeah,
that's their choice. Even though the conditions are poor and they feel guilty or whatever, they can choose every day what they do out of their life. And so
yeah.
you can sit in this little cell and say to yourself, okay, I'm enjoying this moment or not. And so that's basically what I'm doing. As I just I just try to live my life every day.
It's so good, and that's really the best approach, isn't it? It's to be in that moment, and it's you. Have you heard that famous I believe it's John Lennon quote of life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. You
Yeah.
know, so
That's a good quote for you and for me. Yeah.
it's very true.
Sign
It's
that.
very true.
We,
Yeah.
I would definitely sign that. It's like you're for me the same. My red line through my life is change, and I'm
Great.
I'm so curious. So I'm happy to change. Um, yeah. So Jonathan, what I do in the end of the podcast is for all our
Hmm.
listeners, to have 1 minute of silence of inner stillness,
Hmm.
to get grounded, to get like just settled a bit about all the stuff we now talked about. And after this 1 minute, I will give over to you,
Okay.
and I will give you the last words to address to the people around the world. But I think you already mentioned the topic of meditation. It's a big topic
Hmm.
to get to your breath and to get to know yourself. So I invite you to go with me for 1 minute.
Hmm.
So, Jonathan, let us slowly come back. Um, I think one of the most, how to call that, back and forth podcasts I did so far. So you were really
Good.
enthusiastic, and it was a lot of energy. And I think it was great that we shared our point of views. Um,
Good.
Thank you for the time. I'm very grateful for that. And I give over to you for the last words.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Tobias. And look, I think it's great, A, that you're doing this, and B, like you said before, it's easier to do nothing, right? To taking action, doing something is always harder because it's a risk. And so even something like this, starting a podcast, doing something that maybe you never thought of doing before, is something to be applauded. And I think it's great. I like the approach you're taking, and I hope, over time now you'll collect a variety of, like you said, ages of people, kinds of people, different experiences. Um, and just like you moving to a different country, you're going to learn a lot by doing this as well, even though you feel like you're just setting up and facilitating the conversation. I think it's a growth opportunity for you too. And I think it's great. I wish you luck in America. I hope America is good to you. And yeah, once all of this health crisis is behind us, then I look forward to seeing you again in person. Yeah. Take
Okay.
care.